Israel says it will not agree to a ceasefire deal with Hamas that leaves its hostages in Gaza or the Islamist group in power in the enclave. Israeli government spokesperson Ilan Levi, who made this known at a press briefing, said efforts are ongoing to bring about the release of the hostages, but declined to elaborate, saying lives were hanging in the balance.
This war, as laid out by the War Cabinet after the October 7th massacre and handed down to the IDF, remain unchanged. The destruction of Hamas's governing and military capabilities in the Gaza Strip and the return of all the hostages. There will be no ceasefire that leaves the hostages in Gaza and Hamas in power. Beyond that, we have nothing to elaborate. We are, of course, continuing to do everything to bring back the hostages we fear are being tortured and raped and executed in the Hamas terror dungeons, consistent, of course, with the goal of dismantling Hamas so that it can never abduct anyone or massacre them ever again. There are efforts that are constantly ongoing, of course, to secure that goal. I will, of course, not elaborate on them because human lives hang in the balance, and sometimes the less we say, the better. And as soon as we have official information to update, we will, of course, do so.
Qatar says mediation efforts on ending the war in Gaza Strip are ongoing. The foreign ministry spokesman at a press briefing said the escalation in the Red Sea represented a big danger.
We are engaging in serious discussions with both sides. We have presented ideas to both sides. We are getting a constant stream of replies from both sides, and that in its own right is a cause for optimism. However, the situation, as I said, on the ground is very much fluid. Every day you get more information coming in that is harmful to the mediation process. You get statements that are harmful to the mediation process.
Regarding the latest developments in the Red Sea, as you heard the Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs in Davos saying clearly that this represents a big danger to the region in general, but its solution won't be a military one. We support the regional efforts to de-escalate, and we emphasize one more time that this issue began with the escalation in the occupied territories and will end by stopping the escalation in the occupied territories with the stopping of war there.
Well, let's cross live now to Tel Aviv and speak with Arise special correspondent Karl Bostic. Karl, good to see you. We've heard the Israeli speak about its big loss for the first time since the war began this year, specifically 21. Let us in on what you know.
Well, good evening. Yes, I mean the day began with Israel waking up to this horrific news of 21 soldiers killed, deadliest day since October 7th. To put things in perspective, you did explain about how they were in a building that collapsed on them. They were in the southern part of Gaza. Again, putting things in perspective, the Gaza Strip's only a quarter of the size of Abuja, and the northern half has been evacuated to the southern part of Gaza. So, in other words, 2.2 million people, more than half of them are now in the southern part. In other words, the eighth the size of Abuja, about 90% of Gaza's population. And what Israel was trying to do, they were trying to create a buffer zone by demolishing buildings close to the border of Israel. In fact, these were two buildings about 2,000 meters from the border. They were basically trying to do a controlled explosion. And instead, it's still an active combat zone. And a militant fired an RPG at a tank that was supposed to be giving them protection. But when the RPG exploded, then the building collapsed, killing those 21. Once again, just raising, concerns about what are the best tactics or strategy for fighting this kind of war. Do you carry out these kinds of, controlled explosions when you're in an active combat zone or not? But also about the direction of the war strategy. You have multiple pressures on the Israeli government. You have the international community led by the U.S. and European allies who want a ceasefire, who want to pause, who are saying that we need to stop the increased casualty count, and we need to increase humanitarian aid. Then domestic pressures on the Israeli government. Domestic pressures beginning from the families of the hostages who are saying, what's your priority? Because freeing the hostages should be the first priority, and you should pay whatever price is necessary. That's the dilemma, the moral dilemma for Israel, to be honest, because That's why they were hostages, because they weren't protected. And then the other pressure is coming from the families of the soldiers saying, what's the worth of their lives if they're being killed? So that's where we are now. And then we've heard more just a gripping testimony from families of the hostages or survivors who were first released from kidnappers, who basically were saying that the women are at most extreme risk because, well, quite frankly, they're being raped. And now they're saying that there's a real concern about unwanted pregnancies. I mean, just horrific stuff. That's one side of the situation. But then, on the other side, the UN is saying that 90% of the Gazans, like in other words, 2.3 million people facing starvation, not eating every day. So how do you fix this? And that's what's the problem right now, because what we're talking about today, Suleiman, could very well easily happen again next week. It's just an endless cycle. And that's why some are simply saying that we need to have a new government. We need to have new elections, because this is a horrific thing. You hear about sexual violence on one side, you hear about famine and starvation on the other. And every day, where I am, everyone is angry, tense, and they want revenge.
Karl, the shocking thing here is that with that anger and the protests we saw yesterday at the home of Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel is also saying it will not agree to any ceasefire deal. Ilan Levi spoke earlier today.
That's right. I mean, basically, this is the problem. You in a nutshell, you already made the point. I mean, from Israel's standpoint, they're saying there is no ceasefire, there's no end, as long as Hamas remains in power and as long as we don't get the hostages back. So how do you find a ladder for both sides to climb down? And Israel was proposing up to a 2-month or multiple week ceasefire in exchange for releasing all the hostages, in exchange for thousands of Palestinian prisoners, with the proviso that Hamas surrender power. Hamas rejected that offer. So that's where we are right now. It's a very, very, very difficult period, because not only is the outcome of this war at stake, but also stability in the region. That's why you have Qatar involved, Egypt involved, and a concern about this really spiraling out of control. But it's a terrible situation, in which, unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, we could be having the same conversation this time next week, with even more tragedy to discuss.
Well, Karl Bostic, many thanks for your time. You stay safe.